Hello and welcome, everyone. Today, Max and I are excited to dive into something really important for anyone learning English: tenses. Tenses can seem tricky at first, but they're actually super useful, and we're here to make it all clear and simple for you.
That's right, Emma. Tenses tell us when something happens. They're like a timeline for events. Think about it this way. Are we talking about the past, something happening now, or something in the future? Once you know this, using the right tense gets a lot easier.
Exactly. And we'll start with the present tense because it's something we all use every day. The present tense can be split into a few different types, so let's go through each one. First up, we have the simple present tense. Max, do you want to explain this one?
Sure, the simple present tense talks about things that happen regularly or facts that are always true. For example, I could say, I go to the gym every day, or the sun rises in the east. Notice that we use the base form of the verb, like go and rise, to talk about routines or facts.
Perfect. So, simple present is all about things that happen regularly, like routines, or things that are generally true. A good trick is to remember words like always, usually, every day, and sometimes these words often go with the simple present tense.
Right, now let's talk about present continuous, which is used for actions happening right now or around this moment. Like if I say, I am talking to you, or Emma is explaining tenses, this tense is usually am, is our plus verb with ing.
Yes. So if you're doing something at the moment, you'd say, I am doing this, or you are listening. And you can also use it for temporary actions, something you're doing only for a short time, like she is studying for her exams this week.
Good point. So, remember, the present continuous is for now or short-term actions. A tip is to look for words like right now or currently, as these often go with this tense.
Next up is the present perfect tense, which shows a link between the past and now. We use it to talk about things that happened at some point in the past, but are still relevant or have a result now. For example, I have finished my homework means my homework is done, and that's important now.
That's a good one, Emma. It's like saying that something happened before, but it matters in the present. The structure is usually have has plus past participle, so you might say they have visited Paris, which means at some point they went there and now it's a part of their experience.
Exactly, and we often use words like just, already, and yet with the present perfect. For example, I have already eaten, she hasn't finished yet, and they just arrived.
All right, let's move to the present perfect continuous. This one might sound a bit complicated, but it's actually useful when we want to talk about actions that started in the past and are still continuing now. So, if I say I have been working all day, it means I started working in the morning and I'm probably still working.
Yes, so with the present perfect continuous, you use have, has been plus verb with being, and remember, it's often used for actions that have been happening for a while. You might hear phrases like for 3 hours, since yesterday, or all day.
Perfect. So just to recap this part, we've covered the simple present, present continuous, present perfect, and present perfect continuous. They each have their own structure and are used in different situations, but they all help us talk about the present in various ways.
That's a great start. The present tense may seem like a lot, but if you take it step by step, it starts to make sense. The key is to practice and listen to how people use it.
All right, let's keep going. We've covered the present tense, so let's move to another important area, the past tense. The past tense helps us talk about things that happened before now. It's like a way of looking back in time to share experiences, stories, or even just what you did yesterday.
Absolutely, Max. And just like with the present, there are different types of past tenses. Let's start with the simple past tense. This one is used to talk about actions that started and finished in the past. For example, if I say, I visited the museum, it means I went to the museum at some time before now, and I'm no longer there.
Exactly. And one thing to remember with the simple past is that we usually use the regular form of the verb plus ed, like worked or played, but there are also a lot of irregular verbs in English that change completely, like go becomes went or eat becomes ate.
Yes, that's a really good point. English has quite a few of those irregular verbs, so it's a good idea to get familiar with them over time. But don't worry, you'll learn them as you go along. Just remember, simple past is for actions that are complete and happen at a specific time in the past. You'll often hear time words like yesterday, last week, or in 2010 with the simple past.
Now, let's move on to the past continuous tense. This one is for actions that were happening at a specific moment in the past. For example, I was reading a book at 5 p.m. means I was in the middle of reading when the clock showed 5 p.m.
Right, and for this tense, we use was were plus verb with ding. It's a good way to set the scene or talk about what was going on around a specific time in the past. So you might say they were playing outside when it started to rain. That sentence shows something that was happening playing when another action happened, it started to rain.
Yes, exactly. Another fun thing about the past continuous is that you can use it with the simple past to show two things happening at the same time. Like, I was cooking while he was watching TV. It's a good way to talk about two past activities that were happening together.
So let's recap quickly. Simple past is for actions that happened and finished in the past, while past continuous is for actions that were happening around a specific time or along with another action. Both are really helpful for describing events in the past.
Great, now let's talk about the past perfect tense. This one can seem a little tricky, but it's useful for showing that something happened even before another past event. So if I say I had already eaten when he arrived, it means I ate before he came. The structure here is had plus past participle.
Exactly. It's like going further back in time to talk about what happened first. This tense is great for storytelling or giving background information. Let's say you're telling a story, and you want to mention something important that happened earlier. You could say she had already packed her bags before the trip started.
Right, and using the past perfect gives your listener more information. It tells them that one action was completely finished before the other one even started. Words like already, by the time, and just are often used with the past perfect. They help show the timing clearly.
Now, the last one we'll cover in the past tense is the past perfect continuous. This one is all about actions that started in the past and continued up until a certain point in the past. You'd say something like, I had been studying for 2 hours before the power went out. This shows that I started studying earlier, and I was still doing it when the power went off.
And with the past perfect continuous, you use had been plus verb with ing. It's often used to talk about activities that went on for some time in the past before another event happened. It's really helpful for explaining long activities or situations. You might hear people say she had been working at the company for 5 years before she got a promotion.
Yes, and just like the present perfect continuous, you'll often hear phrases like for 2 hours, since last summer, or all morning with this tense. It adds a bit more detail, especially when we're talking about how long something lasted in the past.
So, to sum up what we've talked about so far in the past tense, we covered the simple past, past continuous, past perfect, and past perfect continuous. Each one has its own use, and together they really help us talk about the past in detail.
Exactly. The more you practice these tenses, the easier they become. They're like tools that you can use to paint a picture of the past for your listener. And don't worry if they seem a bit difficult at first. With time, they'll become second nature.
Now, let's move forward in time and talk about the future tense. Just like with the present and past, there are different ways to talk about the future, and each one has its own purpose. Understanding these can make it a lot easier to express your plans, hopes, and predictions about what's going to happen.
Absolutely, Max. The future tense is super important because it helps us share ideas about what hasn't happened yet. So let's start with the most common one, the simple future tense. This one is often used to talk about things that we decide to do at the moment of speaking or predictions about the future. For example, if I say, "I will call you later," it means I'm deciding right now to make that call in the future.
Yes, and we often use will plus the base form of the verb for the simple future. So, you might say, "She will finish her work soon," or "It will rain tomorrow." It's a great way to talk about things you believe will happen. Sometimes we even use words like probably, definitely, or maybe to make predictions less or more certain.
That's a good point, Max. And another way to talk about future plans, especially ones you've already decided on, is using going to. For example, "I am going to study later" means I already had the plan in mind. We use am, is, our plus going to plus verb for this structure. It's really common when you're certain about something that will happen.
Exactly, and one trick is that going to is often used when there's evidence for what you're saying. For example, if you look at the sky and see dark clouds, you might say it's going to rain. It's a bit different from using will, which is more like making a decision or a guess.
Good tip. Next, we have the future continuous tense. This tense is used for actions that will be happening at a certain point in the future. For instance, if I say, "This time tomorrow, I will be traveling," it means that at that specific time, I'll be in the middle of traveling.
Exactly, and the structure here is will be plus verb with ing. You might hear people say things like, "She will be working all afternoon," or "They will be studying at 5 p.m. It's really useful for describing actions that are ongoing in the future.
And just like with other continuous tenses, it's helpful when you want to show that something will be in progress. So if you're planning something and you know you'll be busy, you can use the future continuous to let people know. For example, "I can't join because I'll be working then."
Great example. Emma, now let's talk about the future perfect tense. This one is used to describe actions that will be completed by a certain time in the future. So if I say, "I will have finished my homework by 8 p.m., it means I'm expecting to be done with it before 8.
Right, and with the future perfect, we use will have plus past participle. It's really helpful for talking about deadlines or things that you expect to complete before a specific point in time. You might say, "They will have left the office by the time you arrive."
Yes, and it's often used with time phrases like by tomorrow, by next week, or in 3 hours. It's a good way to set expectations about when something will be done. So if you have a project due, you might say, "I will have submitted it by Friday."
And finally, we have the future perfect continuous tense. This one can seem a bit complicated, but it's really helpful for showing actions that will continue up until a specific time in the future. For example, "By next month, I will have been working here for a year." This shows that the action started before and will still be going on at that future point.
Exactly. The structure here is will have been plus verb with ing, and just like with other perfect continuous tenses, it's often used with phrases like "for 2 years, since last summer," or "all morning." It's perfect for describing things that continue over a period leading up to a specific time.
So let's do a quick recap of what we've talked about. In the future tense, we have the simple future, used mostly for decisions or predictions. Going to for plans you already have, the future continuous for ongoing actions in the future. The future perfect for actions that will be completed by a certain time. And the future perfect continuous for actions that will continue until a specific point in the future.
Right. It may seem like a lot, but once you get the hang of it, these tenses are just different ways to talk about time. And the best part is, you don't have to be perfect right away. The more you listen, practice, and pay attention, the easier it'll get.
Yes, and the more you use these tenses in real life, the more natural it will feel. You'll start noticing them in conversations, books, and movies, and soon, it'll be like second nature to pick the right tense.
So that's the full overview of the main English tenses, present, past, and future, along with their different forms. Each tense helps us express time in a unique way, and knowing them can really improve your confidence in English.
Exactly, and that brings us to the end of our ultimate guide to English tenses. We hope this helps you feel more comfortable with when and how to use each tense. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey.
Yes, thank you. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and share it with your friends and family who are learning English. We'll be back with more helpful tips, so stay tuned for more ways to improve your English skills.
Bye, everyone, and happy learning!
Bye.